Our top story, the official count of deaths in India linked to COVID has ballooned by the worst second wave of infections anywhere in the world and has crossed the 3 lakh mark, adding the country to the grim global club with just 2 other members, that's the United States and Brazil. India is now only behind the United States and Brazil as far as the total death counts are concerned. India has been reporting more than 2 lakh daily cases over the last several weeks, which led to overrun hospitals and long queues outside crematoriums and burial grounds. Earlier, we spoke to NDTV Sukirti for more.
If we look at how things have been panning out in the last 1 month alone, out of these total 3 lakh deaths, at least 1 lakh of those have taken place just in the month of May, which means that 1 in every 3 deaths that have taken place in India has happened just in the month of May, which has been a deadly month for several states across India which have witnessed a crisis of hospital beds, a crisis of medicines, a crisis of oxygen. So at this point, our death numbers continue to be high with over 3,000 deaths being recorded on a daily basis. Experts have been saying that considering there has been a decline in cases in the last few days, lesser people are getting admitted into hospitals at this moment. So eventually we will see a decline in the number of deaths as well. Currently they are high because when we were witnessing the peak of the crisis, a lot of people with severe symptoms struggled for hospital beds. Their oxygen levels went very low, and that is why their situation deteriorated and eventually they passed away. That is why these death numbers are being registered. But because lesser people are getting admitted now, eventually in the next few days, they are hopeful that our death numbers will also decline.
Now, Tamil Nadu is enforcing an intense total lockdown from today for a week till the 31st as the daily tally hovers around 35,000. Authorities see this as the beginning of the flattening of the curve. Well, let's go across to Sam Daniel for more on this. Sam, tell us more about the rules that are now in place. How is this a more stricter lockdown? Also, the government there has complained over the lack of vaccines.
That's right, Karthi. Now the difference is grocery shops and vegetable outlets, which were earlier allowed to function till 12 o'clock, will remain totally shut. Instead, government is deploying thousands of mobile vegetable and fruit outlets across the state, partnering with the horticultural department and the local bodies to make sure public will not have to go out for even purchase of vegetables. And this way, they hope the roads will be completely free and they'll be able to further crack down on violations and break the chain. Secondly, the ruling DMK, in a letter to the Health Minister Harshvardhan, has alleged that Tamil Nadu suffers from shortage of vaccine amid the rise of numbers, particularly hovering around 35,000 every day. And the state government, the ruling party in fact, has asked for 2.5 crore doses of supply every month for 4 months so that they'll be able to vaccinate the 18 plus age group population. And in his letter, Balu has also cited how other states have been given a higher number of doses, comparing it to states like Rajasthan, Maharashtra, Gujarat, saying that these have been given a very high doses. In terms of numbers, he cites Madhya Pradesh has got 1.01 crore doses, Rajasthan 1.2 crore and Gujarat 1.62. And tagging Kerala along with Tamil Nadu, he says these 2 states, in the case of Tamil Nadu, they've got only 91.34 lakh doses and Kerala only 88.69, tacitly inferring or suggesting that the BJP ruled states have been given a higher number of doses and they want Tamil Nadu to be given enough as they ask. At the moment, they've categorized the priority groups, including newspaper vendors, vegetable shopkeepers, groceries, and those working in e-commerce platforms, and even teachers and school teachers and college faculty members to be given under the first priority scheme, and then it will be slowly expanded to other groups. Gargi.
All right, Sam, thanks so much for joining us. With that, so a complete lockdown from today in Tamil Nadu. Now, Karnataka on Sunday reported 626 more COVID deaths. That's the highest single-day toll recorded in the state since the pandemic began. 362 of the deaths were from Bengaluru urban. The state on Sunday reported as many as 25,979 new COVID cases. The test positivity rate for COVID in the state is still a very high 20.76%. Now, amid a statewide COVID lockdown, thousands of farmers from Karnal, Haryana are en route to Delhi, where they plan to observe May 26th as a Black Day, marking 6 months of their protest against the 3 central farm laws. Farmer unions have said thousands of farmers from Karnal have already reached a Shingu border, and farmers have threatened to gherao the commissioner in Hisar on Monday to demand registration of police cases against Haryana Chief Minister Manohar Lal Khattar and cops who allegedly attacked the farmers, and also to withdraw cases that have been put against the farmers. Security has been stepped up in Hisar district as farmers have planned this gherao of the residence of a senior police officer as well to protest criminal cases filed against more than 300 farmers who have been on protest against the centre's new farm laws. The Hisar police has registered cases against 350 farmers with charges including attempt to murder, rioting, unlawful assembly and spreading the coronavirus infection after they protested in Hisar outside a temporary COVID hospital, disrupting the Chief Minister's plans inaugurating it. According to official sources, more than 30 companies or around 3,000 personnel of the Rapid Action Force have been called into the Hisar district.
3 दिन से हम जो है बातचीत के लिए इनवाइट कर रहे हैं नेताओं को, और अब भी जो है वो न्योता खुला हुआ है, तो वो एक्सेप्ट करें और बातचीत के लिए टेबल के ऊपर आएँ। हर बात का समाधान बातचीत के जरिए से निकल सकता है और सही तरीके से, शांतिपूर्वक तरीके से सारे प्रोग्राम को निपटाएंगे। हमारी डिप्लॉयमेंट है ना वो सफिशिएंट।
यदि बहुत बड़ी जनसंख्या में इकट्ठे होते हैं तो लॉकडाउन की भी वायलेशन होती है, और इसके साथ साथ ही जो कोविड बीमारी, कोरोना इतना ज़्यादा फैल रहा है हिसार में और इतनी ज़्यादा डेथ्स हो रही हैं, वो और भी ज़्यादा फैलेगा और इससे आम जन को बहुत ज़्यादा नुकसान होगा। जो पीसफुल प्रोटेस्ट है किसानों का, उसको हम एक्सेप्ट करते हैं। जो लोकतांत्रिक तरीके से वो अपनी बात रखना चाहते हैं उसको हम एक्सेप्ट करते हैं, परंतु प्रशासन बार बार समय समय पर उन्हें बातचीत करने के लिए बुला रहा है, और मैं अनुरोध करना चाहूँगी आपके माध्यम से कि वो आएँ। जो भी मुद्दे हैं हम उन्हें बातचीत से हल कर सकते हैं।
Meanwhile, the Punjab Chief Minister has urged the BKU Ekta Ugrahan to cancel their agitation. The Chief Minister said the agitation is a potential COVID super spreader, and he rejects charges of a pandemic mismanagement by his government. He said, "We have stood with farmers in anti-farm law protests, and now time for them to support us in the fight against COVID."
Both states responding differently, and both having seen a surge in COVID cases in the last month and even till last week of this month. And since this week, as cases are coming down, we are seeing how both the states have responded to how farmers will be agitating. Now, some farmers from Punjab and Haryana have gone towards Singhu border. So that was not stopped anywhere between the two states, though both the states have put COVID restrictions. Now, tomorrow in Haryana, there may be a big showdown because farmers have been protesting that why a criminal case has been registered against them when they were lathi charged and had to face tear gas shells on 16th May during CM's visit. So for that issue, since that has remained unresolved, farmers were demanding that the cases should have been cancelled. That was not done. Police said that it was a brutal attack on the police on that very day. So that is why tomorrow farmers from many districts of Haryana will be assembling in Hisar district to protest against the registration of cases. And police and the district administration seems to be well prepared, though they sent out a message for talks to the farmers as the administration was claiming. But farmers said they have not received any invitation for talks. So tomorrow every eye will be on the Hisar district because farmers are adamant that they will reach Hisar and block the residence of the commissioner's office in the district.
Now, 13 major opposition parties extended support to the Farmers' Union call to observe a countrywide protest day on May 26, marking the completion of 6 months of the struggle. These include the Congress, JDS, NCP, Trinamool, Shiv Sena, SPRJD and the Aam Aadmi Party, as well as the left parties. In other news now, a high-level meeting to take the final decision regarding the holding of CBSE Class 12 exams and other entrance tests took place on Sunday. No final decision was taken. State governments have been asked to send in their suggestions by the 25th of May to the Education Minister for consideration before a final decision is then taken by the 1st of June. The virtual meeting with various stakeholders was chaired by the Union Defence Minister Rajnath Singh, and states like Maharashtra, which have borne the brunt of the COVID cases, asked that the non-examination route for Class 12 students should be actively examined. The Delhi and Kerala government suggested that vaccinating students before the exams. A large section of students and parents have been demanding the cancellation of board exams this year.
सुरक्षा पहले और उसके बाद आपका भविष्य, इन दोनों को देख करके हम फिर 1 जून को आगे का आपको अवगत कराएंगे जो भी परिस्थितियाँ होंगी। हमने ये भी कहा था कि जब भी हम इस बात की घोषणा करेंगे तो कम से कम 15 दिन हम आपको देंगे, ताकि आपके मन में अचानक न हो कि कब तिथियों की घोषणा हो और कब फिर जो है आप संभलें।
दिल्ली सरकार किसी भी तरह की परीक्षा कराए जाने के पक्ष में नहीं है। दिल्ली सरकार ने केंद्र सरकार को भी आज कहा, हम उनको चिट्ठी भी लिख के कहेंगे कि ये दोनों ऑप्शन परीक्षा कराने के ऑप्शन हैं, लेकिन हमारी राय में ये वक्त परीक्षा कराने का नहीं है। परीक्षा से पहले वैक्सीन की व्यवस्था करें। परीक्षा तब ली जाए जब बच्चों को वैक्सीनेशन हो जाए। परीक्षा तब ली जाए जब बच्चों को वैक्सीन की सुरक्षा दे दी जाए। ये मैंने केंद्र सरकार से रिक्वेस्ट किया है।
चर्चा इसी बात पे थी कि किस तरह से आने वाली सीबीएसई के एग्जामिनेशन को जाना है, तो हमने वही कहा है कि आपको राज्य की परिस्थिति को आपको ध्यान में रखना पड़ेगा। और जिस तरह से हमारी सबसे बड़ी देश की प्राथमिकता आज ये है कि जो आज ट्रेंड जो आ रहा है वो पहला स्टैंड से आज का स्टैंड अलग है, और तीसरा स्टैंड हम लोग जो बात कर रहे हैं उसके लिए भी हमें प्रिपेयर्ड होना चाहिए। उसका सबसे ज़्यादा इम्पैक्ट अगर किसी पे होने वाला है तो बच्चों पे होने वाला है। माननीय मुख्यमंत्री जी आज टास्क फोर्स की मीटिंग ले रहे हैं जिसमें इसी पे चर्चा चल रही है, तो हमने उनको वही कहा कि हमें पूरे सुरक्षित वातावरण बच्चों को देना होगा। हमारे लिए सबसे बड़ी प्राथमिकता अगर कुछ है तो बच्चों की हेल्थ है। आज बच्चे 1.5 साल से आप सभी लोग को मालूम है कि परीक्षा की तैयारी कर रहे हैं। पेरेंट्स में कहीं ना कहीं एक संभ्रम की भावना है, तो हमें ऐसे ही कुछ सोल्यूशन पे जाना पड़ेगा जो बच्चों के हित में हो।
Now, one of the hardest fallouts of the lockdown and pandemic has been the impact of the lockdown on migrant workers who've been rendered jobless, and now aggravating the crisis. There's no work, and no work under the Manrega scheme is also aggravating this crisis for the workers. They can't find any jobs, and no work is coming to them through India's largest employment generation scheme. In fact, the government data for May 2021 says 1.85 crore offered work under Manrega.
Poor and migrant workers continue to face the brunt of corona crisis and the lockdown. The stoppage of work under India's largest employment generation scheme, Manrega, in Sonbhadra district of Uttar Pradesh has aggravated the crisis for poor residents. 42-year-old Indradev Prasad is a migrant worker. He used to work in a private company in Gorakhpur. After losing his job last year during lockdown, he returned to his village. Initially, he managed to find work for 50 days under Manrega, but during lockdown this year, all work under Manrega has been stopped.
परसर गोरखपुर में काम करते लॉकडाउन के बाद आए। परसर 50 दिन का काम मिल गया था, 10 दिन तो बाल बच्चा कैसे ऊपर से अभी इस वर्ष आ गए तो यहाँ कोई काम ही नहीं मिल रहा है।
गांव में कोई मनरेगा का काम नहीं चल रहा है क्या?
नहीं चल रहा।
150, 120, 130 प्रतिदिन काम उन्हें 28 अप्रैल से पहले दिया जा रहा है। लॉकडाउन है, इस परिस्थिति में हम लोग का कोई सिक्योरिटी नहीं है।
इस बार लॉकडाउन में मतलब मनरेगा का कोई काम चल नहीं रहा है।
अभी फिलहाल नहीं चल रहा है कोई।
30-year-old Urmila Devi, resident of Keval village, got work for 40 days with her husband in the construction of a bauli under Manrega. But she tells NDTV the payment has not yet been released.
नरेगा में काम किए हैं, पैसा नहीं मिला है। और मेट मुंशी कहते हैं कि पैसा जाओ खाता में चेक करवाइए, खाता में जा रहे हैं तो खाता में पैसा नहीं आया है। हम लोग यही में परेशान हैं।
Village Pradhan Dinesh Yadav says many migrant workers have returned to the village after losing their jobs and are facing financial stress.
बाहरी मजदूर जो प्रवासी मजदूर आए हैं वो भी सब ऐसे पड़े हुए हैं, कोई काम और रोजगार नहीं है। अगर मनरेगा का काम शुरू कर देती सरकार तो लोगों को रोजगार भी मिल जाता, आर्थिक तंगी से लोग बच जाते।
As employment crisis rises in villages, data released by Union Rural Development Ministry says that despite the COVID crisis, 1.85 crore persons have been offered work in May 2021 under Manrega. The work offered is 52% higher than the one offered during the same period in May 2019, which was 1.22 crore persons per day. This increase has been recorded despite casualties, either through death or infection among the operating staff at all levels, including those in the front line.
Millions of Indians have lost their jobs during the corona crisis, and there has been an unprecedented increase in the demand for work during the pandemic. To address the growing unemployment rate and joblessness in rural India, Government of India will now have to work urgently to address all the bottlenecks in the implementation of Manrega to create more and more job opportunities for millions of poor and migrant workers. With Prabhat Kumar in Sonbhadra and Alok Pandey in Lucknow, Himanshu Shekhar for NDTV.
With that, time for us to slip into a short break. On the other side, we'll get you the latest on a new cyclone that is going to hit India's coastline. Welcome back. Yoga Guru Ramdev, the face of one of India's biggest consumer goods and alternative medicine empire, said he was withdrawing remarks in which he ostensibly said that more people died of modern medical treatment during the COVID crisis than the coronavirus itself, following a massive controversy. He said, received your letter, Dr. Harshvardhan, in that context, and to the end, the whole controversy over the conflict of different treatments. With regrets, I'm withdrawing my statement, is what he tweeted hours after the Union Health Minister Harshvardhan asked him to rescind the remarks. However, just minutes later, he also retweeted a post on Twitter saying that yoga and Ayurveda give us complete health. Modern medical science has limitations. It only gives symptomatic treatment, whereas yoga and Ayurveda gives systemic treatment. In a two-page letter in Hindi, Dr. Harshvardhan had written to him, the people of the country are very hurt with your remark on allopathic medicines. Ramdev had drawn outrage and even a legal notice from the Indian Medical Association demanding a written apology for the statement. In other news, the governments of Bengal and Odisha are on high alert for the very severe cyclonic storm Yas heading their way from the Bay of Bengal and likely to make landfall late or on the 26th of May. Both states will be hit by wind speeds likely to whip up to 155 to 165 kilometers an hour, gusting at 185. This is less intense, however, than Cyclone Amphan, which hit Bengal exactly a year ago and for about 3 devastating minutes sustained wind speeds of 240 kilometers an hour. At last, 80 people lost their lives. The wind speed of the 1999 super cyclone, the most severe one ever in the Bay of Bengal, is reputed to have hit Odisha with wind speeds of 260 to 300 kilometers per hour. Well, let's go across to Monideepa now for more. And Moni, in both states, the NDRF, the military and Coast Guards have all been pressed into service ahead of the cyclone hitting.
That's right. Columns of the army are out in some coastal districts in Odisha, I believe. And in Bengal and Odisha, NDRF teams are out as well. 32 in Bengal, I understand, and 28 in Odisha. And then there is the Indian Air Force, which is on standby. The Coast Guard is out as well. And the systems are being put in place. And perhaps we are as best prepared as possible for Cyclone Yas, which is expected to make a landfall around sometime on the 26th, the Wednesday. But even before that, it's going to start raining very heavily from the 25th. So already the state administration in Bengal has started evacuation processes from low-lying areas. People in kacha houses, they are being asked to move into shelters. Besides that, teams are out, with mics telling people to either stay indoors on the 25th and 26th if they are in safe locations or move to safe locations as soon as possible. The people in Bengal, including Kolkata, 8 districts are likely to be affected. The worst, of course, is East and West Midnapur and North and South Sundarban, North and South 24 Parganas, which of course includes the extremely vulnerable Sundarban area. Last time in Amphan, the impact was devastating, and this time the government is trying to ensure minimal impact, but you know how it was last time. Now, what's interesting, at least according to the pictures and graphics that we are being shown, is that the cyclone will move inwards. It's moving in a northwesterly direction. So we don't know whether Bangladesh will be affected or how badly it will be affected by this very severe cyclone. That's how the Weather Department is describing it at its worst. A very severe cyclone that will hit the coastline on 25th, 26th.
All right, Moni, thanks so much for joining us with those details. Now, with that, time for us to slip into a short break. On the other side, we'll bring you a controversy over a construction on a Goa beach. Stay with us. Welcome back. Mumbai's Dabbawalas are struggling to make ends meet as the COVID-induced lockdown snatched their livelihood from them. They have so far received no help from the government. Purva Chitnis reports.
These cycles, identity of Mumbai's famous Dabbawalas, are rusted now. Not used since the pandemic began. Many Dabbawalas are now looking for other work. Bajirao Satkar, a 49-year-old Dabbawala, lives in a small one-room unit in Mumbai's Matunga area. Before the pandemic, he used to deliver 25 to 30 tiffins. Now that's down to 6. Now he has to work as a porter to make ends meet.
पहिले 25,000 रुपये भेटायचे. आता 6,000 रुपये. हाँ तकलीफ आहे. सगळे डबे काढायला आहे ना घ्यायला ग्रँड रोडलाच आहे. पुढे चेनी रोडला आहे. पुढं नरमीन पॉईंटला आहे. तिकडून मग हॉस्पिटलला जायला लागलं. जेजाला नायरला पुढे दुकानांमध्ये.
लय कठीण झाली. लय अडचण होती. लय कठीण झाली. एकच माणूस कामायला असताना मग त्यामुळे मुलांचे शिक्षण दुसरं काही नाही ना दुसरं काही सुविधा नाही ना.
Atul Mendhe, a Dabbawala for 6 years, bought a car and began running it as a cab in November.
ये कमा रहा हो तो भी इसमें नहीं जम रहा है. नहीं हो रहा है पूरा. वो राशन पानी की प्रॉब्लम हो जा रही है. उसमें गाड़ी का EMI वगैरह जाना है तो नहीं जम रहा है मुझे.
Mumbai's famous Dabbawalas have been in service for nearly 130 years. They take warm food from homes and deliver it to offices every day. According to the Mumbai Dabbawala Association, there are in all 5,000 Dabbawalas in Mumbai. But because of the lockdown, only 350 to 400 people are working now. Business is only 5% now.
आज के तारीख में मुंबई डब्बावाला का जो प्रॉब्लम है कि पूरा कारोबार ठप पड़ा हुआ है और इसके चलते परिवार की परवरिश और देखभाल के लिए उनको बहुत कठिनाइयों का सामना करना पड़ रहा है.
Mumbai's Dabbawalas have been serving the city for over a century. But today, because of the pandemic and the lockdown, they are left to starve. They are looking for alternate jobs because the business is down, but even that is not enough. In Mumbai, with camera person Rajendra Dayalkar, this is Purva Chitnis for NDTV.
News now from Assam. Assam has mandatory COVID testing on arrival, but about 400 migrant workers who had travelled from the south back to the state in the Vivek Express got down at the Jagi Road station. The station has provisions of mandatory testing, but the arriving crowd outnumbered the police and forcefully came out of the station. There you can see those visuals of the workers just coming out of the station without getting tested. Even though it's mandatory in the state, these videos have gone viral on social media.
It's not possible.
News now from Goa, where the construction of a retaining wall along the North Goa Wanganam beach by the promoters of an adjoining five-star resort has sparked a huge controversy. Activists and civil society groups have called the wall illegal, even as the hospitality group Fomento Resorts and Hotels Limited has maintained that the wall is being built in its own property and with permissions from the state government's Water Resources Department. The other issue is that a lot of the work is going on during the lockdown and even at night, raising more questions about the activity, and civil society groups are up in arms. Well, to talk more about this, we're joined by Akash Madgavkar, a local resident from Goa and someone who's been involved in this. Akash, just tell us more about how this came to light, and the resort, however, claims that it's within its rights to do this work.
So around a month back, around 17th April, a couple of local residents were on the beach in the evening and they noticed some digging happening on the beach. There were also some fishermen present. So as locals, we've not seen this on the beach before. So we approached the local ward representative at the village panchayat. She said she had no idea what was happening. Then this was on a Saturday night. On Monday, we went to the panchayat and inquired with them as to what was happening. They again said they had no idea and no permission was given by the local village panchayat. So we decided to write to the village panchayat and ask them to write to the said hotel, asking them what they were doing and what were the permissions obtained. After which we received the documentation from the hotel via the village panchayat stating that they had permission from the GCZMA, that is the Goa Coastal Zone Management Authority. This permission was subject to 7 conditions, including it was for repair work. What we saw on the beach was that the beach was dug up. The permission was for repair work and it was subject to 7 conditions. So we took a look at the 7 conditions that were there and we realized that 3 of them were being violated. 1, it wasn't repair work and neither was eco-friendly material being used. There was concrete being used. Number 2, they were asked to get local permissions, but the village panchayat nor the TCP and a couple of other local departments were not aware about it, only the GCZM. And thirdly, there was the work that was being undertaken there were earth movers on the beach digging, which isn't allowed, and couple of, it was shocking to all of us as locals. There were 3, and clearly they were violating 3 permissions. So we approached all the government bodies, the village panchayat, the GCZMA, and we told them, we are locals over here, we don't appreciate what is happening. So what action are you going to take? We want a stop order to be issued. So both these bodies, the village panchayat and the GCZMA, said that they'll conduct an inspection, a formal inspection, which was conducted on 23rd April. We received the report a couple of days later on 28th April, stating by the expert panel so the GCZMA hired an expert panel, two gentlemen who came and studied the matter. In their report, they specifically mentioned that the conditions of their permission, repair permission, were being violated and that they were using concrete.
All right, so that's what the report said. I'd just like to tell the viewers about the statement, from the hotel group saying that they acquired all requisite permissions, began work after consulting the Water Resource Department and always been committed to environmental preservation. We're also now joined by Advocate Pundalik Raikar on the phone line with us. This matter is now in court. Sir, if you could just take us through where it stands legally. And the reason we want to highlight this story is that, during the lockdown, it's very important that civil society groups be alert to any sort of, actions like this.
See, insofar as lockdown and misuse of authority and misuse of permission is concerned, that is rampant in Goa. And I suppose it is rampant elsewhere also in India. We are not aware. But the fact of the matter is this, that if you look at the permission that the hotel is talking about, that permission is dated 25/7/2017. Now that permission is very clear. Now, that permission was pertaining to repair of a Gadga wall. That Gadga wall is still existing. Now, in that permission, neither in the application of the applicant, in this case the Fomento Resorts, they have not mentioned anything about the linear wall. So permission dated 25/7/2017 is concerned was pertaining to repair of a Gadga wall, not reconstruction. Now, after the application of the applicant made in 11/5/2017, a site inspection was carried out on 13/6/2017 by the expert committee of the GCZMA. Now, in that expert committee report, they have clearly stated two vital things. One is there is existence of only the Gadga wall, repair permission to be given to repair the Gadga wall, and second and most important, beyond the Gadga wall, they said, is the non-revenue area of the government, which is the beach. Non-revenue area belonging to the government.
Right.
So therefore now the thing is, once the expert committee says that the beach area is the government property, the Fomento Resorts is claiming that beach is their property. Where the fraud lies, and we have to bring it to the notice of court. Now, we have tried to bring it to the notice of the court, but because of pandemic and all that, so many other reasons that, matters got delayed. The fact of the matter is that is a public beach, and where they are presently constructing is a public beach. They cannot go ahead with the construction. It is more importantly a NDZ, no development zone, which
right.
GCZMA, yes.
Right, very, very important points, and we're hoping that it does, the court does take up this matter that you all are pursuing. But again, the reason we want to highlight this story is because under lockdown, we can't allow any sort of environmental violations to take place at a time when everybody is meant to be locked down. And it's important, if indeed this is, then hopefully the courts will take view of that. Thank you so much, Akash and Advocate Pundalik, for joining us on the show today.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Thank you. Welcome back. The official count of deaths in India linked to coronavirus, ballooned by the worst second wave of infections anywhere in the world, has crossed the 3 lakh mark, adding the country to the grim global club with just two other members, the United States and Brazil. India is now only behind the US and Brazil as far as the total death counts are concerned. India has been reporting more than 2 lakh daily cases over the last several weeks, which led to overrun hospitals and long queues outside crematoriums and burial grounds. Now, the lockdown in Delhi has been extended by another week, and if the daily COVID numbers continue to drop, the process of unlocking will be initiated. That's what Delhi Chief Minister Arvind Kejriwal said on Sunday. For now, the lockdown will be in place till 5 a.m. on May 31st, and the unlock process will also be slow. Mr. Kejriwal also underscored the need for caution as the city struggles to bring down the positivity rate. The lockdown was declared last month as COVID cases started an upward trend. Now, what is the big worry is the lack of vaccines for the age group of 18 to 44.
दिल्ली सरकार ने ये निर्णय लिया है कि एक हफ्ते के लिए लॉकडाउन और बढ़ाया जा रहा है। अगले सोमवार 31 तारीख की सुबह 5 बजे तक के लिए लॉकडाउन बढ़ाया जा रहा है। अगर केसेस के घटने का सिलसिला इसी तरह से जारी रहा अगले एक हफ्ते भी, तो 31 तारीख से फिर हम अनलॉक की प्रक्रिया चालू करेंगे। एकदम से अनलॉक करना ठीक नहीं रहेगा, तो वो भी धीरे धीरे कुछ गतिविधियों को 31 तारीख से फिर हम खोलना चालू करेंगे। पिछले 24 घंटे का मैं आपको आंकड़ा बताऊं तो ये संक्रमण दर 2.5% के भी नीचे चली गई है। यानी कि अब 100 लोगों की हम टेस्टिंग करते हैं तो उसमें 2.5 लोग संक्रमित पाए जाते हैं और 97.5 लोग ठीक पाए जाते हैं। अब वैक्सीन की बड़ी प्रॉब्लम आ रही है, वैक्सीन की बहुत कमी महसूस हो रही है, लेकिन मुझे विश्वास है जैसे हमने बड़ी समस्याओं का समाधान किया है, ऐसे वैक्सीन की समस्या का भी समाधान निकलेगा, हम मिलकर निकालेंगे।
Now, Dr. Gagandeep Kang, a top virologist who's also a member of the Supreme Court appointed committee on medical oxygen, has said in an interview to NDTV on the issue of buying vaccines, aren't we a little late to the table on this one? This as India has delayed the process of bulk buying vaccines, unlike several other nations, and may now have few options available in the international market, even as many states have complained about vaccine shortage.
We have a vaccine shortage now in the country. We are trying to ramp up production, Covishield, Covaxin. Sputnik, when available, will not be available at this rate in the real numbers that we seek. So therefore, what are the options for India other than to import vaccines? And if that is a solution, shouldn't we be doing that right now, where we buy up vaccines, bring them in as and when they are available? Buy. We've not done that in the past, but is that something we need to do now?
Aren't we a little late to the table on this one? The rest of the world has been buying vaccines at risk for a year. So what's the supply that is available in the market for us to go now and say we want to buy vaccines? I think we should be doing deals with our own manufacturers. There are multiple manufacturers that are ready to make vaccines that are in clinical trials. We don't have the results of their studies now, but why are we not doing at-risk investments in those manufacturers? And some of them will play out. These vaccines have had a really high success rate. And if you can go to Zydus Cadila, Biological E, all the companies that are making vaccines, which will be ready in the latter part of this year, tell them, ramp up your production, make as much as you can. If your trials are successful, we'll take everything you've got. I think we'll get more doses that way.
And that needs an appetite, ma'am, for failure as well. When America did warp speed and invested $10 billion in March last year, they took into account that some of that money would be lost. And they were okay with that. And this was when Trump was in power, who was an anti-vaxxer. So do we have that appetite to take a financial risk? Because in a situation like this, if you're not prepared to do that, some would suggest that, it's a lost cause almost.
Well, I definitely think we should be taking that risk. And if we do, it sets us up well for the future as well.
Now, new data from the United Kingdom, this is just data which has come out yesterday, shows that 2 doses of AstraZeneca, in other words, what we call Covishield here, has a 60% effectiveness against B1617.2. That was the variant first discovered in India. In simple terms, is that good effectiveness after 2 doses, or would ideally we have liked something better?
Well, obviously we'd like the perfect vaccine, the one where you take 1 shot and it protects you forever against all variants. But I will bring us back to about a year ago, when WHO developed what's called a target product profile for a vaccine against SARS-CoV-2. What we were hoping for then was a vaccine that would have at least 50% efficacy that lasted for at least 6 months. And every vaccine that we have so far exceeds that target. What we are seeing is that with a number of the variants, the efficacy is less with 1 or 2 doses of the vaccine than, than against the strain for which these vaccines were originally designed. Now, does this mean that we will need booster doses? Does this mean that we will have to revaccinate individuals, or that we will have to design new vaccines in order to protect against these variants? These are things that we are still figuring out. But so far, from what we have learned, the vaccines work. They work very well. And it is possible to make them very quickly. So would we like for a vaccine to be 90% instead of 60%? Yes, but 60% is not bad at all.
Which brings me to my next question. Should the gap in Covishield doses be reduced? Recently we extended them based on the data we are seeing in the United Kingdom.
Well, the data from the United Kingdom is based on a 12-week gap. So they started their program in December with a 12-week gap between the AstraZeneca and the Pfizer vaccines. So what we are seeing today is that when you give 2 doses of either the Pfizer or the AstraZeneca vaccine, you get pretty good protection against the B117 variant as well as the B16172 variant, right? And this is above 60% with 2 doses. they actually don't have data for a shorter interval because they haven't used a shorter interval. They are now going to switch to shorter intervals because they have finished vaccinating their priority groups with the first dose of the vaccine. So currently there are no data that tell us that 8 weeks is better than 12. We will learn that, and these are experiments in a sense that are natural experiments run in the immunization program that will yield data. Does this apply one for one to India?
Dr. Kang,
Sorry, go ahead.
As I understand it, after a single dose, the data in the United Kingdom for AZ, and in fact for Pfizer as well, shows less than 40% efficacy. Therefore, again, if we were to bring forward the second dose, given that efficacy is still quite low for the first one, wouldn't that protect our population more? I understand the point about numbers of vaccines available, but I'm just asking in terms of protecting our population.
No, this is a really important question, but the data that have been presented are for all symptomatic infection. What we really want is vaccines that protect against severe disease and death, and previously we have had data from the UK showing that we get about 80% protection against severe disease and death even among the elderly. So what it requires now is for us to study this data more carefully and understand what exactly we are talking about. What is it? Is it all symptomatic disease? How much protection against mild disease? How much protection against severe disease? And the other thing that I think is really important for India to consider is that before we went into the second wave, we already had parts of cities with over 50% seroprevalence, and in rural areas 20-odd% based on the ICMR sero surveys that have been countrywide. Now, what does this mean? If it is about 2 exposures to the virus, one being a natural infection and the second being a vaccine, will that behave like 2 doses of vaccine in the UK? We actually don't know that at this time. And I think it's really urgent that we try to get this information on what is vaccine effectiveness against people who are known to have been infected previously and have got 1 dose, as well as those known to not be infected previously who have got 2 doses. We don't have that information at this time.
Yeah. What about real life data available in India? We've now been doing this for several months. The Indian Army has vaccinated approximately 99% of all soldiers. The Indian Armed Forces, I presume, Air Force, Navy would have. So, there's a lot of robust data over there in terms of the number of infections they have post-vaccination. Number 2, I'm told the Max chain has done real life studies as well. Just under 14,000 frontline workers in hospitals. The numbers there are very encouraging. 1 doctor has passed away. And yet the IMA is concerned because they point out that they've got data of doctors who haven't been fully vaccinated, and the number of fatalities have been larger. Apollo has also done a study, not so much about the second phase as yet, but certainly about that period between the first and the second wave. So based on all of this data, are we in a position to comment on how effective the vaccines are on COVID?
Actually, vaccine effectiveness studies are not that challenging. What you need is numbers. What you've described with the army and, the armed forces and the hospital chains are groups that were immunized in January and February, and therefore data from March onwards should be sufficient to give us efficacy data. You've also kind of left out the police and the railways, which presumably will also have a fair amount of good information. But I think we really need every source we can get, and we should be trying to measure efficacy wherever we can.
Well, first on the show, a story of hope. One of the youngest COVID-positive survivors who's now gone home, a baby born preterm on April 17th at 28 weeks of pregnancy. And this is due to severe COVID in the mother. The baby needed mechanical ventilatory support and born with a birth weight of just 1,000 grams, I beg your pardon. The baby later tested positive. After 30 days of treatment for COVID, the baby has finally gone home. Let's go across to Uma for more on this. And Uma, this is the story of hope and positivity we all need to hear.
Absolutely, Gargi. Our youngest COVID survivor, certainly a hero. And along with her, of course, her parents who have kept the hope and persisted with that. And much more importantly, perhaps, the team of doctors and nurses at the private hospital, Krishna Institute of Medical Sciences, where she was for the last 1 month and then went home. She was in fact born on the 8th of April and now, therefore, about 6 weeks of age. She was born preterm, as you mentioned, at 28 weeks. In fact, the mother had turned COVID positive and she was on mechanical ventilation at that time of delivery. I'm going to be joined by the parents of this very, very youngest of COVID survivors, and I'm also joined by Dr. C. Aparna, who is the Clinical Director of Neonatology at the Krishna Institute of Medical Sciences. Dr. Aparna, first of all, thank you for joining us and many congratulations. The parents are so thrilled that you were able to give them back their baby safe and healthy. What is the kind of challenges that you faced with this particular baby? Because 1,000 grams, 1 kg is obviously very preterm and very underweight as well. And there must be other parameters that you must have been looking at. Plus, of course, the COVID challenge. At what stage did you know that the baby was also COVID positive?
Thank you, Uma and team NDTV. Yes, it was very, very challenging and exciting to be part of this journey with the baby of Mrs. Balamonika and Mr. Rahul. I think, first of all, one of the primary challenges was, in transporting this baby who was just 920 grams when we received this baby from a different hospital and who was on ventilatory support. And, obviously our team of doctors and nurses had to go and transfer this baby in all the personal protective equipment. So that itself was a big challenge, getting the baby across safely, trying to maintain temperature, keeping track of the oxygen saturation levels and, the ventilation during the transport. And subsequently, of course, this baby was in our COVID isolation neonatal intensive care unit. So for around the next 8 to 10 days, the baby was managed in the isolation, where we kind of removed the baby from the mechanical ventilator because the baby started getting better. And the baby was managed with non-invasive ventilation or nasal ventilatory support. So during this time, of course, the baby's parameters had to be very closely monitored, and there were a lot of practical challenges in terms of managing the COVID isolation with a different team of staff nurses and trying to keep the other parameters, infection prevention, providing good nutrition, monitoring the baby's oxygenation levels and the ventilation, monitoring the heart rate and blood pressure optimally, with all the other limitations that we ourselves were having, by means of staying in the PPE the whole day. And of course, it was very heartening when the baby started showing recovery. And of course, we waited till the PCR came back negative, after which the baby was taken to the regular NICU and where the regular preterm care was provided. And of course, we had to wait for another maybe 3 weeks more for the baby to reach an optimal weight and to reach a status where the baby could maintain temperature, maintain the breathing status without any additional medical help.
Yeah. Okay, let's go across to the parents of the baby, Rahul as well as Balamonika. Mr. Rahul, first of all, congratulations on the baby coming home. The journey must have been very, very tense for the two of you and the family.
Yes, actually we are very happy right now because of our baby is recovered very good, and Dr. Aparna madam has given a good support to us virtually, as well as when we are not able to attend to the baby physically, she has called us virtually and shown a baby to the mother and reduced the gap between both of them, has given a good support to my wife at the time.
In fact, I was told that your wife was in fact asked to express her breast milk, and that milk was being fed by nurses who were in fact playing foster mother to your baby.
Yeah.
So that again.
Okay, the baby is now home. Do you already have a name for her?
No.
Actually, we are searching for that.
Searching for the name. Not yet.
Okay. Dr. Aparna, I do understand that you have delivered as many as 35 mothers who were COVID positive, and now there is a big worry about babies, neonatals, or children, in fact, catching the infection. What is the kind of rate of infection transmission that you found in these neonatals, and what is the kind of precautions that you would advise? Because there is also this talk, it's not really a formal advisory yet, saying that if you can avoid a pregnancy, avoid it during this COVID pandemic period. What would you say to that?
Yes, we have kind of catered to around 40 women now who were COVID positive during pregnancy, who were delivered. I'm not including the women who could continue pregnancy and who got treated or recovered from COVID. So amongst these 40 babies, the good news is that none of the babies tested positive in their first PCR screening. So the transmission through the womb is extremely rare, to the tune of maybe 1 to 2%. And we at least have not seen a case of intrauterine sort of transmission. The newborns who have tested positive have been, cases of postnatal transmission or transmission after birth, like with the baby of Mrs. Balamonika as well. So we have kind of picked up babies who tested. So we have kind of had babies who have tested positive in the second or maybe third week. And all these have been cases of postnatal transmission, and only around 15 to 20% of newborns actually have developed symptoms because of COVID. So that's another thing. Most of them are asymptomatic. Now, when it comes to the outcome of newborns, it has been quite reassuring, and we have not had any mortality in the cases, the babies who have tested positive. However, COVID in pregnancy has been a little bit more challenging to manage. So although the government and the obstetric bodies have not come up with a formal recommendation on this, I think on a personal note, we as doctors do believe that this may not be a safe time to actually plan pregnancy. One does, happen to be in that stage where one might be thinking of starting a family. Probably it would be very wise to say that this is probably not the right time. But those who are pregnant, now the good news is that the government as well as all the medical and obstetric bodies have recommended that it is safe for pregnant women to get vaccinated for COVID.
Okay, so once again to Rahul and Balamonika, many congratulations. I know Balamonika was also actually on mechanical ventilation at the time of the birth of the baby, but both of you are back to health and safe and happy at home. So many congratulations, and we do hope that your baby gets a nice beautiful name and continues to stay healthy. Thank you so much, Dr. Aparna, as well as Rahul and Balamonika for joining us. Back to you, Gargi.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for that, Uma. And yes, we're all waiting to find out the baby's name. Well, let's get you the latest data on COVID, and the official count of deaths in India linked to COVID, ballooned by the worst second wave of infections anywhere in the world, has now crossed the 3 lakh mark, adding the country to the grim global club with just 2 other members, the United States and Brazil. India is now only behind the US and Brazil as far as the total death counts are concerned. India has been reporting more than 2 lakh daily cases over the last several weeks, which led to the overrun hospitals and long queues outside crematoriums and burial grounds. So the number of cases have come down, however, over the last couple of weeks. Remember, the peak was over 4 lakh. Now we're reporting under 3 lakh cases. Well, let's go across to Sukirti now for more. And Sukirti, even as the cases have come down over the last, couple of days and weeks, the number of deaths are now catching up, given that there is a lag, of course, between infections and finally those who pass away. India crossing that grim mark of 3 lakh deaths in total.
Well, yes, until a few days ago, we were seeing over 4,000 deaths on a daily basis. That figure has come down slightly to about 3,000 deaths on a daily basis. But that still is a very big number. If we look at how India has reached this grim milestone of about 3 lakh total deaths being crossed. If we look at those figures, just yesterday, Maharashtra recorded over 600 deaths, Karnataka recorded over 700 deaths in a span of about 24 hours. And out of the total figure of 3 lakh, at least 1 lakh of those deaths have taken place just in the month of May, which means that 1 out of every 3 deaths that have taken place in India so far has taken place just in the month of May. And you're right when you say that there is going to be this lag between when our cases start declining and what our death numbers are reflecting, because a lot of these deaths are high because many of these people have been in the ICUs or ventilators for the last 10-12 days. When we recently covered a story on ICUs, there were experts who pointed out that this time the ICU recovery time is a lot longer. Even people in the much younger age group are spending anywhere between 12 to 15 days in ICUs, many of them even on ventilators. But considering we are seeing a decline in cases right now, in the next 1 to 2 weeks, we could end up seeing a slight decline in our death numbers as well.
All right, Sukirti, thanks so much for joining us with that. Well, let's now focus on the 2 states that are a big worry right now, and that's Tamil Nadu and Karnataka. Sam joins us from Tamil Nadu, from Chennai. And Sam, today the state goes under a very severe lockdown for a week. The cases, though, have been coming down slightly, and there's hope that the curve is now flattening.
That's right, Gargi. In terms of second day, Tamil Nadu has been showing a slight dip, and Chennai for the 3rd day has been showing again up to 7% dip, and authorities say this is the first indication of the state's flattening tally, and they hope in the weeks to come it will be able to further decline. And they say, unlike other states, Tamil Nadu is peaking quite late, and that's why it may take a few more weeks for them to bring down the numbers. From this morning, that's right, Tamil Nadu is enforcing an intense total lockdown. We come to you from the Mylapore area, where you see all the shops completely shut here. The difference this time is, unlike earlier times, even groceries and vegetable outlets have not been allowed to open, and only mobile outlets organized by the government with the help of horticultural department and the cooperatives department will be allowed to function. In fact, here you see one such mobile outlet selling vegetables, and this is something across Chennai. Authorities say there will be 2,500 such mobile outlets selling groceries, bread, including milk, and that way the authorities hope that they'll be able to check on violations. There will be total enforcement of lockdown without much of traffic. Even banks have been asked to function with 1/3 of their workforce and to manage a bulk of their work by working from home. And even in the case of continuous process industries, those companies ought to arrange either vans, cars or buses. Their employees cannot use 2-wheelers, and this time authorities hope it will work. In fact, yesterday there were moments of concern as across Tamil Nadu in several districts there were large-scale violations, large-scale gatherings for shopping, as authorities had allowed the shops to be open till 9 o'clock, and also they had allowed outstation buses within the state, and that many had raised concerns that this could actually export cases from one place to another. That was not a good idea, but the government sources say it was a calculated move to make sure people who are stranded, migrant workers within the state who don't have jobs, who may suffer without cash or food, this gives them an opportunity to get back to their hometowns. So this will be a 1-week-long intense lockdown. Authorities hope this would work. It will break the chain, even as the numbers, Gargi, hovers around 35,000 every day, with the first indications of a slight dip.
All right, Sam, thanks so much for joining us. With that, let's focus now on Karnataka. And Maya, Karnataka reporting the maximum number of daily deaths, 626 deaths on Sunday. Also, the positivity rate remains very high.
Concern still in Karnataka, which has just crossed 25,000 deaths since the start of the pandemic. Yes, a very high number of cases reported yesterday as well, over 25,000. And 626 deaths reported in that 24-hour data. But it also includes deaths that had happened on earlier days, which had not yet been caught up. So it does include a backlog as well. But still 626, a very, very high number indeed. And the positivity rate remains over 20%. Now, overall, the state has, of course, been seeing a shutdown. The state government doesn't like using the term lockdown, but it has been seeing a shutdown for several weeks now. And this goes on till June the 7th. As a result of this possibly, and also perhaps because of the lower testing, the numbers of new cases, the overall number of active cases has been coming down. There are now less than 5 lakh active cases in the state. Bengaluru reporting just over 7,000 cases, as the new cases tend to be coming now more from the districts, from areas outside urban areas, outside Bengaluru, which is of course another matter of concern because they may not have the greatest of health facilities. And there is also resistance to testing and sometimes even getting treatment for corona in the rural areas as more awareness needs to be created. So the shutdown in the state until June the 7th. Vaccination is still a challenge, far more demand than there is supply, priority being given to the second doses for those over 45, those over 18 to 44 being vaccinated, but only those who are in the front line like auto drivers and taxi drivers and those living in crowded areas. So not everybody in the younger age group can get the vaccine yet in Karnataka. A few private hospitals obtaining it directly, but vaccinations still remain a crunch in this state, which has seen over 25,000 deaths since the start of the pandemic.
All right, Maya, thanks so much for joining us with those details. News now from Bengal, and from the 9th day in a row, the new COVID infections in West Bengal stayed below the 20,000 mark. 156 people lost their lives, a dip from the record death toll of 162 people on the 20th of May. But black fungus is making its presence felt. A suspected case of black fungus died in the last 24 hours at a state hospital. Till Sunday, the health department reported a total of 7 confirmed cases of mucormycosis and an 8th suspected. A little over 70,000 people, 45 plus, and frontline workers were vaccinated on Saturday. Well, time for us to slip into a short break. More news on the other side. Stay with us. Welcome back. A 5-judge bench of the Calcutta High Court will hear the Narda bribery-related cases today, in which 4 political heavyweights, 3 of them from Mamata Banerjee's Trinamool Congress, are currently under house arrest. Of the 4 leaders, Firhad Hakim, a key minister in the fight against COVID in Kolkata, was allowed by the court to work from home. Initially, the 3 others were in hospital. They have since gone home into house arrest. The CBI submitted a charge sheet against the 4 in the Narda bribery case, in which a total of dozen Trinamool leaders are accused of either taking bribes or agreeing to do so. 2 of them have since joined the BJP but have had no action taken against them. That is Suvendu Adhikari and Mukul Roy. Both are with the BJP and both were accused in the Narda bribery case. So far, no action indicated against either of them. Meanwhile, the CBI has moved the Supreme Court against the house arrests of the Trinamool leaders. CBI has challenged the Calcutta High Court order, which allowed the house arrest of the 4 Trinamool leaders. The governments of Bengal and Odisha are on high alert for the very severe cyclonic storm Yas, headed their way from the Bay of Bengal and likely to make landfall late on the 26th of May. Both states will be hit by wind speeds likely to whip up to 155 to 165 kilometers per hour, gusting at 185. This is less intense than Cyclone Amphan, which hit Bengal exactly a year ago and for about 3 devastating minutes sustained wind speeds of 240 kilometers an hour. At least 80 people lost their lives last year in both states. The NDRF, the military and the Coast Guard have been pressed into service. The time for us to slip into a short break. More news updates on the other side. Stay with us. Welcome back. Well, the latest data has come in from the Health Ministry on COVID numbers, and 2.22 lakh new cases were detected in the last 24 hours. But the deaths are 4,450. 54 in the last 24 hours. Remember, on Monday, the cases also usually go down because testing is lower on the weekend. So 2.22 lakh new cases being reported and 4,454 deaths. Remember, India has crossed the 3 lakh mark in the number of deaths, becoming the third country after the United States and Brazil to lose 3 lakh people to the COVID pandemic. Well, to talk more about the COVID situation, we're joined by Dr. Chakra Rao, Chairman, Indian Resuscitation Council and Senior Critical Care. Also, Dr. Minal Vohra, Consultant Endocrinologist, Manipal, and also Dr. Nishit Chandra, Director, Interventional Cardiologist, Fortis Escorts Heart Institute, New Delhi. Thank you so much, doctors, for joining us. And again, the death numbers are over 4,454 deaths being reported in the last 24 hours. And as many experts have pointed out, this is a lag expected, given that the peak in cases was a few weeks ago, and now the number of deaths are catching up. Dr. Rao?
Hello. Can you tell me again?
Right. We're talking about the high number of deaths being reported over the last couple of days, even though the cases are coming down. And this is because of the lag between, the COVID peak in terms of cases. We were reporting over 4 lakh cases a few weeks ago. And now the number of deaths now are high because it's catching up now.
Yes. It will take a little more time because these are the cases that have come a week back or 10 days ago. So they are on the treatment. So that is the only thing. Otherwise, there will not be any issue. The deaths also will be decreased within a week or 10 days. Sure.
Right. Dr. Vohra, now the worry though is that even as cases are coming down, this is at a time when many of the states are under a lockdown, and the real challenge is going to be to watch and see when the lockdown starts easing and whether we see, cases going up again.
Well, the idea of lockdown is very important. We have to really realize that even if the government releases or eases out the lockdown, the prevention methods have to catch up. Otherwise, we will really not be able to prevent the third wave, or we will not be able to prevent the number of rising cases. So lockdown is an emergency which government has posed because people were not listening to the rules, the regulations, and they were really not following what actually was needed to be done. Otherwise, the second wave would not have come. Otherwise, the second lockdown would not have been imposed. But because people were not responsible, people were really not responsible towards masks, towards sanitizing their hands and social distancing, a little relaxation on the part of the government that the lockdown was released, and the people were really rushing out of their houses thinking that corona is just over. So that has come, and that has brought back this lockdown again. And again, if the government relaxes and people just do not follow what is supposed to be followed, probably this lockdown will have to be prolonged.
Right, Dr. Chandra, that is something that we don't want. However, authorities need to be a lot more careful and look out for the signs. We shouldn't relax given that the cases are coming down, though they still remain very, very high, over 2 lakh cases being reported every day. But even so, going forward, we still need to all behave like we're in lockdown, and at least those who don't need to be out and about shouldn't be.
Yeah, so that goes without saying that the reason we are in such a trouble in this second wave was that the majority of population has let their guards down. After the first wave finished, the people resorted to mass-scale gatherings, celebrating and rallies and all that, and they were not wearing proper masks. So we cannot win a war by creating more beds, getting more drugs, or getting more oxygen. If we have to conquer this pandemic, the only way is to prevent it from happening, because the sheer number of population is against us. So if we have to, we cannot give resources to everybody. We can't create so many beds. No country can create. That will be overwhelming. The only way to prevent the third wave from occurring is, as other panelists also have said and emphasized rightly so, is just by prevention, which does not cost much.
Right. Dr. Rao, when we talk about prevention, of course, vaccines is the other big issue and the big concern right now, because as cases are coming down, we need to vaccinate very quickly a big portion of our population. However, that's a huge challenge right now, given that most states are facing shortages.
Of course, the government is also coming up with the newer methods of vaccinating or with different vaccines. and the government is importing almost all types of vaccines that are available in the world, and they are also relaxing the method of vaccinating. If somebody has taken a particular dose of vaccine in the first dose, and they can go for the other dose. That actually the work is going on, and it will be approved by the government within 10-15 days, and it will be done. And the most important thing from the beginning, what the government and everybody is telling is the wearing of the mask and social distancing, and don't spend more than 5 minutes with any of the stranger, because it is going to catch you the organism, the COVID. So that is the problem. So all these things, even the people should have the mind to prevent. Otherwise, the government cannot do it, or the doctors cannot do it. The people should learn how to prevent themselves.
Right, absolutely, and hopefully we will get more vaccines soon to be available, for the age group of 18 to 44. Dr. Vora, now another challenge is, of course, the black fungus cases that have spread across the country, have come up across the country. We know it's not an infectious disease or something, but this is also leading to a lot of fear in people's minds. There's been a lot of talk of overuse of steroids, and now I see more and more doctors speaking out about how patients are now very reluctant to even go to hospitals, or are very, reluctant to take steroids for treatment, and that too is very dangerous.
That is perfectly right, Gargi, because see, mucormycosis is not a new entity for the medical fraternity.
Sure.
We were dealing with mucormycosis right from day one when we thought of diabetes, uncontrolled diabetes. And it has been like ages that we've been talking to people that control your sugars, please control your sugars. Diabetes is a very killing disease if not well controlled. And now in this scenario, when corona itself is hitting and giving a rise to blood sugars, and then the rampant use of steroids, which is actually, even when not very well indicated, even in the milder cases, even people themselves self-medicate with steroids, just thinking that steroids is going to prevent every complication of COVID-19. So this was bound to happen. And any steroids will give rise to sugars, not rise, rather the word should be they will jump. The sugars go madly high. We are seeing cases every day with 400s, 500s, even 600 sugars. So sugars with steroids, with a broken immunity, any fungal infection is bound to happen. So not only black fungus, which is the layman term, actually what we are calling is the mucormycosis. The mucormycosis anyways was known complication of uncontrolled diabetes. And now with steroid usage, with very high sugars, this mucormycosis is picking up. And mucormycosis, it's something, if we really don't stop the rampant or the just unjudicious use of steroids, is definitely going to be another pandemic. We have to control the use of steroids. Invariably, we have to learn to control blood glucose by the use of insulin, of course, because insulin is the only answer right now with so high sugars. And we have to control blood glucose. We have to judiciously use steroids, and we have to use the right dose of steroids for the right time. We have to cut short the timing of steroids, and then mucormycosis can be prevented. But otherwise, it's a complication, a deadly complication, which will affect your eyes, which will affect your vision and brain.
And it needs to be detected early in case you do get it. Dr. Chandra, another issue is a lot of, cardiac issues in COVID patients, post-COVID patients. And this is something, again, as many people recover from COVID, that they have to continue monitoring their health.
So this has come to as a shock to us also in the second wave. We are seeing lots of younger patients who didn't have any history of heart disease in the past or any other comorbidities, diabetes or anything, and they have recovered from COVID. And having recovered from COVID in the 7th day, 10th day, they are coming with heart attacks, strokes and this happens because of the increased clotting, because this COVID causes inflammation into the arterial lining of the blood vessels of the heart also, and causes more coagulopathy. The clotting power of the blood goes high. So there is sudden clotting in the blood. So that is all the more reason for a person to be very, very cautious about taking medicines. And now, but the good thing in this is that there are good, if detected in time, we can treat them with anticoagulants. But again, the word of caution that anticoagulants have to be taken by the strict supervision, under the strict supervision of a doctor only. It is not an over-the-counter drug. Like steroids, we should not be abusing it. Like steroids have been abused right and left and thus caused mucormycosis and opportunistic infections. So similarly, anticoagulants should not be used. It should be used under the strict supervision of a physician. So another thing, actually, I want to stretch upon the black fungus thing was, we have to introspect why in India we have more mucormycosis. The same in US, Italy, the number of cases of COVID were very high. They were also given steroids. But why the mucormycosis was not there in Italy, Brazil, South Africa, or US? So in this, yes, the steroid, injudicious use of steroid, uncontrolled diabetes is one aspect which is very well explained. But the very poor sanitation and hygienic practices, which in India, unfortunately, we are not taught right from the beginning. People are spitting right here and there. The hygiene levels in general are very low. They are using reused masks 2 days, 3 days, 4 days in a row. They are not sanitizing properly. So in addition to judicious steroid use and control of strict blood sugar, we have to inculcate good hygienic practices. Every year, before COVID also, every year we used to have all these infectious diseases, dengue, malaria, typhoid. Why it is so? It is because of the poor hygiene levels. No country in the world has such abysmal level of hygiene. So we have to stress upon hygiene levels if we have to control these infectious diseases.
Right. Well, I'm completely out of time. Thank you so much, doctors, for taking time out and speaking to us on the channel this morning.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, the big concern now is COVID cases going deep into rural India. Now, in Bihar, just take a look at this government health center in the Suki village. This is in Madhubani's Khajuao, being used as a cow shelter. This even as the COVID pandemic continues to rage. A local, in fact, they said that not a doctor or a nurse has visited this health center in the last year. People go to the primary health center in another area. So just take a look at the facilities in this village. Now, this even as Bihar has reported 4,002 new COVID cases and 107 deaths in 24 hours. The daily new cases have declined, but deaths are now rising. And Bihar has over 4,500 deaths so far, nearly 7 lakh cases so far. But as far as the vaccination goes, remember many states, because they're facing vaccine shortages, are putting out global tenders for vaccines. But the Bihar health minister told NDTV that Bihar is not going to be putting out such a tender.
मंगल जी, एक कहा जा रहा है कि केसेस कम आ रही हैं, लेकिन बिहार सरकार जो ग्रामीण इलाकों में जो केसेस बढ़े हैं या केसेस हैं वो कहीं ना कहीं कॉग्निजेंस नहीं ले रहा है।
नहीं, देखिए, बिहार में प्रतिदिन लगभग 1,40,000, 1,30,000 की जांच हो रही है और पूरे जांच को यदि आप देखेंगे राष्ट्रीय स्तर पे तो बिहार तीसरे स्थान पे, हम आबादी के हिसाब से भी तीसरे स्थान पे।
लेकिन आपका RT-PCR अभी भी 30% है उसका।
30 नहीं, 40% के आसपास है। 2,84,00,000 करीब जांच हुआ है और विभिन्न राज्यों के भी आंकड़े को देखेंगे तो स्पष्टता आएगी। और अभी ICMR का गाइडलाइन भी आया, जब ये सेकेंड वेव आया तो जांच को बढ़ाने की आवश्यकता थी और विभिन्न जगहों पर जांच को बढ़ाने की आवश्यकता थी, विभिन्न चौक चौराहे, बाजार, रेलवे स्टेशन, बस स्टैंड, ऐसे सब जगहों पर। तो ये ICMR से सुझाव आया कि एंटीजन टेस्ट को बढ़ाया जाए, तो हम लोगों ने भी एंटीजन टेस्ट को बढ़ा दिया। तो इतनी जांच करने के बाद जो आंकड़े आ रहे हैं वो सबके सामने हैं और आज राज्य की स्थिति यह है कि एक्टिव केस के मामले में हम देश में 16वें स्थान पे हैं।
लेकिन बहुत सारे जगह वेंटिलेटर तो आपका अनपैक भी नहीं हुआ, जो प्राइम मिनिस्टर इसमें स्कीम में भेजा गया था।
नहीं, जो आप जिसकी चर्चा कर रहे हैं, जो PMO से आया था, उन वेंटिलेटरों की संख्या 580 के करीब है और उसमें से लगभग 500 वेंटिलेटर विभिन्न मरीजों के लिए, विभिन्न प्रकार के रोगों के मरीजों के लिए उपयोग में लाए जा रहे हैं।
अनयूज क्यों?
नहीं, मैंने कहा 580 करीब वेंटिलेटर्स है जो 580 नहीं, इसके अलावा भी मेरे पहले से वो यूज्ड है। प्राइवेट हॉस्पिटल को इसलिए दिया कि मशीन हम रखे और मशीन का उपयोग किसी का जीवन बचाने में नहीं हो, ये तो उचित नहीं है। यदि मशीन से किसी की जीवन बचती है तो आज सरकार की यह प्राथमिकता है कि हम लोगों का जान बचाएं।
लेकिन वही जब आपने प्राइवेट हॉस्पिटल्स को दिया तब ना उसका यूज
नहीं, प्राइवेट हॉस्पिटल को तो 40-50 दिए होंगे केवल, बाकी हमारे सिस्टम में यूज।
वैक्सीन की किल्लत क्यों है? क्यों वैक्सीन के लिए सारे स्टेट्स ग्लोबल टेंडर कर रहे हैं, आप उससे बच रहे हैं? ऐसा क्या है, इतना ओवर कॉन्फिडेंस क्यों है आपका?
नहीं, देखिए अभी तक करीब 1 करोड़ 1 लाख वैक्सीन हमको मिला है और उसमें से लगभग 95 लाख वैक्सीन दिया जा चुका है। तो स्वाभाविक है जैसा वैक्सीन मिलेगा उतना हम उपयोग करेंगे।
आपको ग्लोबल टेंडर करने की जरूरत
नहीं। आप ग्लोबल टेंडर के बारे में थोड़ा और जानकारी ले लीजिए कि यदि किसी ने प्रयास किया है तो क्या परिणाम आए।
यानी कि आपको लगता है इसका कोई फायदा है?
मैं ये नहीं कर रहा, मैं कह रहा हूँ आप पता कीजिए यदि किसी ने प्रयास किया तो उसके परिणाम क्या है।
धन्यवाद।
In other news now, the BJP and RSS had a meet over image concerns in the midst of this pandemic. The BJP is fighting the big perception battle. Prime Minister Modi, Amit Shah and Nadda were present at this meeting, and RSS Sarkarva Dattatreya Hosbale was also in this meeting. Image perception and UP elections were the big concerns. Sources say that discussion was on COVID and electoral challenges in UP, an important decisions in organization and government likely. News now from Kerala, and today the newly elected MLAs of Kerala will be sworn in as the 15th Kerala Assembly begins its session. The session has 53 first-time MLAs out of the 140. Well, let's go across to Sneha now for more. And Sneha, there's even a father-in-law and son-in-law duo.
Well, that's right. In fact, that's going to be a first in Kerala. We have Chief Minister Pinarayi Vijayan as well as the National President for DYFI, currently also Minister Mohammed Riaz, who is the son-in-law, who will be in the Assembly. But it's a swearing in, a very important day. It's an Assembly session where left has a historic mandate. Historic, when I say historic, it's not in terms of a consecutive second, but with the same Chief Minister returning after a full-fledged 5-year term. It's bettered its performance even when compared to the last time. The UDF has put forward a new opposition leader, Congress's V.D. Satishan, 56-year-old. He has a huge challenge before him to keep the party together, to present a united opposition. Now, 53 first-time MLAs are part of the 140 new MLAs who will be sworn in today. And it's very interesting that there are, at least this year, there's a double digit to the women MLAs in the Assembly. We have 11 women MLAs in the Assembly. Of course, much of the credit to the left again. 10 out of 11 are women MLAs of the left. And the one MLA of the UDF is a non-Congress MLA. She is an RMP leader, KK Rama, whose husband late TP Chandrasekhar, former RMP leader, as well as a former CPIM leader was killed, was murdered in 2012, and among those who have been arrested have also been CPIM workers. So all of this at a time when there's a pandemic, so strict protocols also being followed inside the Assembly. And of course, need to mention this, 3 ministers sitting inside the Assembly, 3 women ministers. That would be the highest number for any one government at a given time in Kerala.
All right. Thanks so much, Sneha, for joining us there with all those details. Well, time for us to slip into a short break. On the other side, we'll get to the international news. Stay with us.